Today we're sponsored by Ari. I want to thank you because they're leading the cinema and lighting universe. What'd you say?
Thank you. So thank you to Ari for being one of the leading providers of cinema and lighting in the film industry and for sponsoring this episode.
How is that possible?
Nailed it.
Something like that.
You are such a pro.
That's a great question.
Like psychologist talks right there.
I charge by the hour.
Hi.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Hey guys, I'm Aryeh.
And I'm Christina.
And we are your hosts at the Film Up podcast, where we explore the stories of accomplished filmmakers and creatives and their road to success. Each episode is dedicated to a nonprofit of our guests' choosing. The goal here is to help filmmakers and help the world at the same time. We believe you can do both. Today, we are thrilled to be joined by Zach King.
And Zach needs no introduction, but for those of you who don't know, Zach is an LA-based filmmaker known for his clever magic tricks. He is one of social media's most prominent content creators with a combined social reach of over 105 million followers and billions of views. Zach has been featured on The Ellen Show, Good Morning America, Adweek, and People. His company, King Studio, has partnered with brands including Disney, Apple, Sony, Nike, Coca-Cola, and many others. Zach is also a supporter of Kids in the Spotlight, a Los Angeles-based nonprofit that helps foster youth heal and grow from trauma through the power of storytelling and filmmaking. So he is dedicating this episode to their organization. You can learn how to get involved by going to kitsinc.org. And as always, all the details are listed in the description of this episode.
So cool that you guys do that. I just found out, 10 minutes ago that you guys are doing that with your podcast. But I love that.
Yeah, it's super important to us. I mean, any attention that comes from these episodes, it's just nice if we could do a little bit of good for the world. So we appreciate it, because you picked the nonprofit. So thank you.
Yeah, Kids in the Spotlight is, we can talk about more of them at the end, but they're awesome. They're incredible.
Feel free to kick it off with that. Why was Kids in the Spotlight important to you?
So my wife and I have been involved in foster care for almost since we got married. We had our first foster kiddo for 6 months, who was a baby. We started with infants, so we had a few babies in our house, and then we actually adopted through the foster system.
Wow.
So my oldest son is now adopted in the family.
Wow.
And we have a biological son as well, who's a little younger than him, but they're very close in age. They're like 4 and 5 right now.
Wow.
So that fun like wrestling age. I never had brothers, so I don't know if it's like normal to wrestle and fight and
Definitely
hit. But did you guys have siblings that were boys?
Oh yeah, 2 older brothers
Okay.
and 2 younger
So
sisters.
is that okay?
Yeah, that's
they're
definitely,
fighting.
yeah.
I had all sisters, so it was like more like I was joining their tea parties, and it was a little more relaxed.
So you had worked with this organization before.
So we were foster parents, and my wife and I were talking about starting a foundation just to. It seems like we met all our friends in LA, and that's the thing you do when you get a certain level of success. And we were like, what was the thing that we're passionate about? Obviously, it's foster care, but I wanted to tie filmmaking into it, and we were just dabbling in the research, and I found on Instagram actually this organization called Kids in the Spotlight. Mm-hmm. And it was literally like a version of what I wanted to do, which is taking foster youth who are about to age out, and they do the whole range in ages, but it's really just giving them training, learning a career. And what's cool about it, they're not only getting the skills of filmmaking, but they're actually getting to tell their stories. So in the screenwriting phase, they take them all the way through, like you're going to write something, you're going to produce it, and then you're going to edit it, and then you're going to premiere it at a red carpet. They get a really cool theater down in LA, and they bring in industry professionals along the way too. So like last year, Terry Crews acted in some of these kids' videos that they wrote and directed and produced themselves. Wow. And it's cool just to see their stories, because they are sometimes dark. They are very deep and intense, but in a way, it's a little bit of therapy along the way for them as they write the screenplay. Wow. So it's just a cool organization. It's run by an incredible gal who's been running it for, I think they've been going for almost 10 years now.
It's so interesting because every time a guest selects a nonprofit, we're always wondering, like, to what degree are they connected to this nonprofit? Is this just a cause that they cared about? Have they worked with them before? But I'm kind of curious to why you got involved in the foster process in the first place. Like, what was important to you about that?
My wife and I, when we got married, and this is when we were dating, we talked about this a lot. We both had she has 2 adoptive siblings. I have 1 adoptive younger sister. And so we were just around the adoption world a little bit more. And we knew when we started a family, we wanted to have some tie to adoption. Foster care for me was a new experience. My family had never fostered anyone. I didn't know what that was like. I based it on the movies that I had seen. Do you remember It Takes Two with the Olsen? Was it the Olsen twins?
Yeah.
That movie for me was like just a version, the only thing I knew about foster care, right? Like a really shallow version. And my wife studied foster care and was a social worker briefly before we ended up fostering ourselves in our home. So she had that background, and we just, as she was working in social services here in LA, she was just like, I want to be on the other side of the desk and actually a foster family and see what that's like and see the needs there. And so we had an extra room in our home. We were like, I mean, it's a little more, it feels nonchalant now. We're like, oh, we have an extra room, let's just do it. It's not,
we have running tap water. Yeah. It's just like,
we could do, but I mean, there's a lot that goes into it, but the basic need was there that we needed a room. And we also thought, like, babies, that's got to be a little easier than an older kid. We don't have to have a full conversation with them yet, so we can just have babies. And I think now I'm like, I can't do the baby phase. I've done it enough, and I would love to just, keep growing the kids.
Well, speaking of, working with kids in their youth, that's kind of how we like to start off this podcast, of where the filmmakers started off and how they began their careers. And you specifically started when you were really young. When we were doing a bit of our research, we know like when you were 7, that's when you got your first camera and you're filming your younger sisters and going through that entire process. So it seems like it was imbued in you from a really young age. But what prompted you at 7 years old to get a camera? Like, how did that even come about?
Yeah, I remember not knowing what filmmaking was at a super young age, but when I was 4, I just found the footage. Actually, my dad filmed me watching Jurassic Park for the first time, and when I watched that movie, I remember like there's so many different emotions. And I just recently showed my kids just a month ago Jurassic Park, the first one, and I still skipped a few scenes, like when the dude gets eaten over the toilet in the bathroom. But they were just displaying the same emotions. Like they were afraid, but they were super excited. And we broke in the movie into like several different nights of viewing, kind of like a TV show. And every day they had different questions about what was going to happen. And then at the end of it, they asked like, what was that? Because they know dinosaurs aren't real. And that was the same thing I was processing. Like, what? I know it's not real, but then my parents would tell me about animatronics. And at the end of the VHS, they had a little like 4-minute, I think Spielberg and ILM were talking about how they made the dinosaurs. And that really intrigued me. And I still didn't understand that it was a job you could get paid for, but I knew you could make these things. So as I grew, as a 7-year-old, my parents had the video camera, and that's when I think I connected the dots. Like, oh, that is what shot that. Wow. And so I just started making my own movies. I started a lot in claymation. I would watch movies like Chicken Run and all those movies were like really good. And Wallace and Gromit was a big favorite of mine. And I started doing that because, as a kid, you don't have and even now, like you don't have the full production value that you want. But in claymation, I could still actually build these massive castle sets or whatever I wanted. It felt like the world was kind of endless to whatever I could build. So I would build these claymation things and do the stop motion. And what's cool is you also learn patience, I feel like, because it takes forever to do the claymation. So I always tell younger kids, like, if you want to start somewhere and you're frustrated that you don't have budget to do what you see, done in Star Wars or these massive movies, then you can just start in claymation. You control the entire world and you learn everything, all the skills, framing, everything in there.
Well, it's so interesting because it's easy to look at you and say, look at all these, like the success, look at all the followers that you have and all the productions that you're making, but you had pretty modest beginnings and you had to figure out your way through the entire process. And I know you worked to pay your way through film school, and it was really fascinating researching you because there's a series of awards and certificates and winning money and launching and getting contracts. But one of the things we wanted to do was figure out which one of these were actually meaningful to you, to launching you into your process. So if you wouldn't mind, we'd love to hear, from that story, like picking up where you just left off, on your process through high school, college, that first big break, and a bit of your story on your road to success, some of the failures along the way. Love to hear about it.
Well, I have to thank my sisters because they put up with a lot. I had 3 younger sisters, and they were my actresses and my entire film crew for all of high school. And I enrolled all my friends from high school. It was hard because I was homeschooled. So I had some co-op friends, but not too many. But once I got to go do a high school class in the morning, it was a technicality. I was into piano. and I needed to compete at state level. And to do that, you have to be in a public school. So my dad enrolled me into like the choir class, but that was huge because then all of a sudden I had this other group of friends outside of my homeschooling group that I could tap into, like, hey, come be an extra in my war movie, or come help hold the boom pole or whatever. And so I just kept making tons of movies, and YouTube wasn't a thing when I was in high school, so I didn't have anywhere to put them. It would be awesome if I wonder what would happen if I did. I mean, they were terrible, so nothing would happen. But it was fun just to, on Friday nights, it was like a family viewing night. And so that was my publishing deadline of every Friday. I would have like this viewing of whatever I made that week, which I thank my parents too for sitting through all those years, because I think they were probably cringing the whole time. But it was fun. I had this pressure to make something, and then I would play it. And that was literally just rinse and repeat all of high school. And I got into my grandfather. I was super lucky, but he offered all of his grandkids a car for their 16th birthday when they got their driver's license. And I begged him, and I was like, I took this whole pitch over to his house, and I was like, hey, instead of a car, like I don't need a car. What if I get a computer and I put the cash towards it? You guys remember the Canon XL2? That camera. So, and on the mini DV tapes. So I asked him, like, can I please get that instead? And so we worked it out. I got a little bit of cash instead of a car. And I went down to the Apple store. I still remember like the Apple store I went to and how much Final Cut Pro cost as the studio bundle. It was version 3 or 4. It was when it got finally packaged into the studio, like $1,300 bundle.
I'm hearing the origin stories of the Final Cut King. I see it.
Yeah, no, that's the origin story. So I go down, I buy this thing, and you had to buy that it was like a package of DVDs, which is kind of your license fee every 2 years when they upgraded it. So I did that and I mowed. Luckily I lived in Oregon, so there was tons of huge fields, but I would like sit on tractors and mowers and do everyone's field and do my parents' field, and did tons of pruning just to continue to pay for the film stuff. And then towards end of junior of high school, I knew I wanted to go down to LA. That was kind of an obvious, like all my friends knew, my family knew it. So I applied to a film school called Biola, and I got a rejection letter, and that was like huge bummer. But my backup in my pocket was that I have I was into piano still. My parents had me practice many hours a day. So, which is one of the reasons I was homeschooled, to do that. And then I got to do film in the evenings for, usually ended school before all the public school friends. So I was armed with like, luckily being able to go to a music school, get that scholarship. And then that was still part of Biola. And that allowed me to, end up sitting in the classes, the film classes that were happening.
Were your parents supportive of you taking this film route when you were so into piano? Was it like almost heartbreaking for them? Like, he's spending all this time doing film stuff, but we wanted to play the piano.
No, the piano, and my dad still talks about like, the reason we wanted you to do piano was so that you learn how to get really good at something. The thing that I laugh at now, it's like, it seems like such a niche thing to get good at. Like, it's not like few people get a career being a piano performance person, but it actually has helped a lot. Even, one of my best friends is the composer for me. And when I make films, like I'm 100% sure he'll be the person that composes for me. And it's cool to be able to talk to musicians and it's a big part of even the flow, I feel like, of a good story. It feels a bit like music. You can describe it with music and different tempo changes. So that is an interesting skill that helps filmmakers for sure. And,
success is relative depending on where you're at in your life and what's happening. It kind of hits differently, but it might feel the same as something that happened really young, or something really young can feel the same as it's really old, even though comparably they are very different situations. Right. When you were younger, what were some of those moments of like, holy crap, this is wild? Because I know you like won the $35,000 YouTube Creator Award, and they like flew you out to, I think it was New York or something. Was that a big formative experience for you, or were you like, this is cool, but whatever? I just like
there was a bunch of formative experiences for sure. Maybe in the wrong order. I'll see if I can get them right. Okay. But a few that come to mind off that. So what you're talking about is I could just continue the story for a second. So I go to film school, and I'm sitting in the back of these classes that I'm learning, how to do all the classic stuff that you learn in film school, lighting, but less about the visual effects. And that was an aha moment for me. I had been using, Final Cut Pro had a motion graphics software, but it wasn't super powerful. It wasn't like After Effects. So the day I learned about After Effects was definitely freshman year of college at some point. It was the Christmas break of freshman year, because I went home, I found Andrew Kramer, I downloaded After Effects, and I that was a mind-blowing moment. The fact that you could do, he was doing they were classic tutorials back then. It was like him getting hit by a car, adding an explosion, doing lens flares. And that for me was like, whoa, you can do this at a level that looks like Hollywood in his compositing technique. So I started learning that, and that was all of that 2008 Christmas break for it was a long Christmas break. They give 6 weeks. Every day, every hour was watching his tutorials, learning it, again, shooting with my sisters who were still at home in high school and making these other videos. Again, they weren't going to YouTube just yet. But when I got back, I created a YouTube account because I wanted to put them somewhere. And also I had been inspired by Andrew Kramer to make tutorials because I was like, these tutorials are super entertaining. There's nothing like this for Final Cut Pro. Like I had to read the manuals myself, and it was terrible. And like, man, I mean, nobody does that anymore. Like, but manuals are. Imagine learning how to drive a car from a manual or something. So I decided to copy what Andrew Kramer format was, but for Final Cut Pro. And there was, I think, one other person doing Final Cut Pro tutorials. But my goal was also like I had this other one, which is doing 2K tutorials, which no one was doing on YouTube. So I was uploading these, and then. It started growing my YouTube channel, and there was no AdSense. The partner program wasn't a thing, and this is back in the days when I remember being inspired by there was Mr. Guitar Man, Joe Penna was a YouTuber, Freddie Wong, Corridor Digital was just starting, those kind of channels. Michelle Fong was just starting their channels, and so I was watching these early days of YouTube, and it felt fun because it felt like a TV show, but on YouTube, and I'd go on my computer and watch every Friday when they released something, and then I would release tutorials. But I never felt like I was definitely not the mainstream YouTuber. I was just a small niche channel, maybe 10, 20,000 followers. And I just continued to do that. And then eventually a bill came for film school and the music school, and it was like I have to start paying for school somehow. My parents were like, hey, you're on your own now. And so I figured out I needed to sell some sort of upsell course to help subsidize school, and I made this DVD course I was shipping out of my dorm room, and it was for all the Final Cut Pro tutorials. So I would burn 10 hours. I would burn them in my laptop all night, or I'd hire my roommate to help me do that, and we'd package them, take them to UPS every day, and that was another cool moment, realizing that financially, if I could support myself with film as a career, something I was interested in, which was editing.
And I want to pass it off to Tina because I know she has a ton of awesome questions, but I did want to ask you one more part in this story. Well, there's a million questions, but was it wild for you to go from being homeschooled to now being in college and taking full-on classes and then the creator stuff? What was that like?
Yeah, I mean, you're taking I'm still pretty antisocial, but homeschooling for an antisocial kid is amazing because I can just not talk to anybody. Obviously, I know my sisters, but I hung out my room, and that's probably why I got good at editing, because I could just sit there and not be distracted by other kids and just focus. And going to college was a totally different experience. I mean, I went to Biola, so it's not like a party school, but I lived on a dorm room with 40 other guys. And coming from just sisters, I was again, it was what we wrestle on Friday nights. How do we do this? It was a huge learning curve for me as a dude.
Yeah.
Well, you touched on, starting out as a one-man band doing After Effects, but now you have a team of 25 plus people. I'm curious, what was that growth like for you? Were there growing pains? How did you kind of evolve from the first day to now?
Yeah, there's so many growing pains. There's so many great lessons that you learn. And it started pretty naturally. You tap into people like me working with my siblings. That's the most natural progression of growing a team. So one of my first team members was my sister at the time, or I don't know, you can't say at the time, she didn't die, but my sister in the beginning worked with me, and this is when I was in the garage after I had graduated film school and left Biola. I was still down the street in this is in LA, and my sister was nearby, and I was like, hey, I'm getting a lot of random emails for this Final Cut King business. Can I hire you to help field them, kind of thing? And so that's a natural extension, and then it grows from there. It's hey, who's that buddy from film school that was really good at producing? I need to hire them because I'm getting an inquiry for doing a project that it's bandwidth needs, I don't have enough bandwidth, and then it's pretty natural growth. I think when you look at it now, and it's even I look up to the companies, and you're how does Elon Musk have 200,000 people? It just is a slow growth kind of thing, and it naturally happens. But for me, it really is referencing, I was telling you guys earlier, we have a few set of hiring rules, and one of the big ones is are they a kind person? Are they genuinely like a good human being to be around? You know, part of the advice I got in film school, which I always felt weird about, was like, they were like, this is how it's going to be. You're going to go into LA, and people in LA are just terrible. They're terrible executives. They're mean. They're going to make you get coffee, and they're going to throw it on. And like, you hear all these horror stories, right? And you work for a tyrant, and it's kind of encouraged to do that. And I'm not in LA in that world, but through the people we've met, and maybe people are just nice to me because I am who I am, but I like to think that there's just genuinely good human beings in LA too, you know, around the world. And like, go work for those people. Go be assistants to them. You don't have to work for people who are these crazy tyrants. So for us, it's like, find somebody that's awesome and kind, work with them, people you want to travel with, because that's a big part of our line of work is we're overseas half the time, it feels like, on productions. And it's already grueling to be on a production here in the States, but when you're overseas, you're tired, you're in a different time zone, people are hangry, and you know, you just want to work with genuinely awesome people, and then people who are really skilled. You know, we describe it a little bit. I know other companies call it this too, but the T-shaped person. Mm-hmm. It's like, can they be a generalist and learn quick in a lot of different areas, but are they also deep and skilled down in a singular area? So that's the kind of person that, you know, we look for on our team.
And also, I think your team's really awesome. We were talking to some of your team members, and they were saying, you know, you guys are really big on mental health and like work-life balance, and that's very rare to find in film. And so I was curious, like, why was that so important to you? Did it come from family? How did you implement that, like, 40-hour work week?
It came from the growing pains of business. We've done the part where we burn out a ton, and we've done the all-nighters. I did that in college, and you can do it for a season of your life. But now I actually have like sleeping problems because of the all-nighters that I've done. Like, like I used to do 3 or 4 in college, like all night, and then you go to classes.
I think that's like the limit. Once you pass 3 or 4, like you start seeing things.
Yeah. No. Well, the problem I have now, and it hasn't been fully diagnosed, so I'm annoyed by people who do what I'm doing, which is the self-diagnosis. I have this, but like, my wife hates it. I can fall asleep in like 3 seconds, and apparently that's not a hell. It should take you like 5 to 10 minutes at least to fall asleep in a healthy sleep, if you're a healthy sleeper. But for me, it's like I can sleep anywhere. But we learned that from doing all-nighters and from traveling, and you can just go in a taxi and immediately you're out. So we learned all those, you know, things from growing pains. We've done the burnouts, and so for now, and it's, you know, is always interesting when you work with production companies. We do the 12-hour days for, you know, maybe a commercial here and there, but for how we run as a business, we're pretty 9 to 5, and it's not always going to be 100%. You know, for us, it's like the dream version. We try, and that's the vision of it, is that we are healthy and don't work on the weekends and do stop at 5 p.m. But obviously, there is going to be a random client call. There is going to be a production that goes a couple hours overtime, and you're at 14, 15 hours at that point. So that does happen, but it's really trying to push continually like the 9 to 5 rhythm. It also came, you know, I think it seems maybe extreme now, but back then for me, it was a slow growth kind of thing. Once I got married, I was like, oh, I actually want to be home maybe by 8 p.m. or 7 p.m. so Rachel and I can be together. And then after you have kids, it's like, well, I actually want to spend a lot of time with my kids now, so let's pull it back. So it was a natural progression. It wasn't like one day we were like, hey, we're 9 to 5, you know, it's like slowly pulling back the reins.
Yeah, and then I saw in your TikTok bio, the slogan, I want to read it because I don't want to butcher it, but it says, bringing a little more wonder into the world 15 seconds at a time, which I love. I wanted to know, like, where did that come from? Did it come from your kids?
You know what that came from? The honest truth?
Vine.
No, it came from the slogan up there is like, when you sign up for TikTok or any of these platforms, they make you put something there. Like, they're like, fill this in for 15 characters or whatever. I'm like, I don't know, like making magic for 15 seconds at a time. So like, it's like one of those quick fill in the blank things that happens when you sign up for the app. But for us, you know, we look at our content there, and sometimes I have a hard time because I don't use social media. Probably a lot of people don't know that, but I don't use social media as a normal person. I only go on, I post. Once in a while I'll go on TikTok or see what's currently trending or interesting things like that. I watch a ton of YouTube, but I'm not a consumer of much social media. I don't really have a Facebook. I have a Facebook account that I, you know, used in high school or whatever. I use text to get a hold of friends or Facebook Messenger, but I'm not on the feeds. And so it does sometimes feel like it goes against my belief of putting something on the internet or on a feed, because I don't think it's necessarily good for you to only consume. And I have a really addictive personality, so I could be, and I've definitely gone through seasons of that where I'm like just going down the feed forever and doing the doom scrolling. But for us, it's looking at the content and saying, you know, so many people are on social media. Let's put out work that like peppers their day with something awesome. And that's where the wonder comes in. That's where the magic comes in. And for us, it's like the awesome step is, especially since we have so many young viewers, when they see it, if it can start that kind of aha moment that I had as a kid watching Jurassic Park, like, oh, you know, he's doing filmmaking. It's not, it might get you into magic, but it's more like filmmaking techniques, and it's more sparking creativity. If it can get kids to go out and make stuff, that's the end goal, and get them to be creators and makers and not just consumers of what's on the feed. That's what I'm excited to see, is the next generation that latches on to what they see people making. You know, I love channels like Mark Rober, who are showing like the science of things, and like I think he's getting thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of kids inspired to be scientists, and that's like amazing.
Well, it's interesting to hear about like the social media approach to this, because I saw a quote which was from 2010, so it might not still be relevant, but
a quote from me.
A quote from
okay,
you.
let's hear it.
And it was essentially just paraphrasing. It's just more of the meaning behind it, where you were interested in becoming the next Steven Spielberg, doing feature films. And you know, I know another big break for you was on the Ellen DeGeneres show, when you talked about Vine and you were just blowing up in Vine, and then I'm sure that had a ton of influence into the social media space. But for you, is your goal still in that feature film Steven Spielberg stuff? Of course, you must love what you do now, because how could you not? It's just palpable. You can see it in all the videos you make. But do you feel a pull going toward that? Do you feel you are so locked into this? There's so many opportunities in this space. Can you even go toward that? So it's a loaded question, but curious to your thoughts around all that.
It's a great question. I used to think that YouTube was a stepping stone, and this is probably back in 2010, all the way up until maybe 5 years ago. It was like, the pitch was for the team, hey guys, this is a stepping stone. We want to, I still want to do feature films at some point, but I'm less hurried to do it. Partly because I think it takes a lot of maturing as a storyteller to get to that level. But also for me, it's just the time. There's never been a time when I look at a feature film, I want to do it really well. From writing the script all the way to finishing it, I'm looking at like 4 years, right, of making something. And I wouldn't be able to make anything else or continue what I'm doing. Like to me, it's a hard stop. I'm always amazed by filmmakers that are doing like 10 movies at a time. Like, how are they doing that? Like, I don't have the attention to do 18 million movies. But I eventually want to get to that point. But it's not even. I don't view it as the benchmark that's like one step higher. It's just a different thing to spend the energy on. So right now it's just not the focus, but it is in the back of my mind. Like, I noticed lately in the last maybe 9 months to a year, I've been just pulling up my phone a lot more and writing in the notes tab, like random ideas or scenes or bits of things that are definitely going towards a longer thing that aren't in the normal YouTube notes that I have or Vine or TikTok notes. So it's, and it might have nothing to do with tricks or magic and what I currently do. It'll look separate, but.
And what was that moment like for you when you were on the Ellen DeGeneres show? Like, was that something to you that was like, holy crap, I'm on this show, and like I was doing Vine and I know I have a ton of popularity, but this is like a national television thing with the what was that?
It was still back in the day where and I think it's that wall is just breaking down now for a lot of creators, where you glorify all the things you're raised on. So for me, it was watching, my mom watched a lot of Oprah, but it was watching things on broadcast TV and the traditional formats of television show or late night shows. And so all of a sudden getting to go on the broadcast format, it was like, we'd just say like, oh, we're, leaving the internet and we're gonna get to go on this kind of the real thing, the real deal on the broadcast. But I think that wall is broken down now. It was really an awesome opportunity, but it's funny, it doesn't translate to more views. I remember screenshotting our stats in the day of, and like, it was actually one of our lower days that it didn't give us a boost because the audience doesn't go there. And that's one of the first times a little aha moment of like, oh, it doesn't necessarily translate. We would get a lot of pitches around that time of like, hey, if you come on the show. Another big one was Amazing Race. My wife and I got to be on that show, which was a dream, because that was like, all my childhood, that was one of the biggest shows I watched growing up, that and American Idol. And, but I'll never get to be on American Idol because I don't sing. But The Amazing Race was another one. We were the producers would pitch like, hey, you're like, what are you doing? Like, this is going to get you a lot of followers. And we're like, well, maybe. And when we look at it, like, I think we got 3,000 more that week maybe than, but yeah, it's not a crazy, everyone thinks, broadcast is going to bring this massive wave. But what things like Ellen do, because they are so well known as just names and brands, is brings a lot of awareness to, that's where you finally have my mom's friends text me and they're like, oh, so cool, I saw you on here. It almost validates in a way, like, what this weird side project it feels like you've been working on that no one quite maybe has dismissed for a while.
Well, something that I love about your content is it's not just like CGI. You try to incorporate a lot of like practical effects. Like you have a rotating room, you build
Right.
sets for every video. And so one of my favorites is the quicksand one.
Yes.
Where you're like on the beach and you drop down.
Yeah.
I would love to know like what that process was like from the conception of the idea to executing the set.
Partly the reason for that too, and it's cool you picked up on that, but the CGI, I'm terrible. That's where my limits as an editor stop. Once I get into like actual modeling and 3D tracking and CG, it stops, but I know I can build something. So that's where I start. And it also comes from a little bit of the philosophy of, I love what James Cameron does, how you look at I think it's in the behind the scenes of Titanic, he talks about, you can do all the techniques as long as you're jumping from one to the other. So you go from CGI into practical, into miniature, back into CGI, and it keeps the audience on their toes. And then they forget to realize what is what, and it just all feels like a cohesive thing. And so we do a little bit of the same. And now that we have team members who can do, amazing CGI, there is a lot in there. I think sadly their work goes a little bit unrecognized because it's usually deleting a lot of things or it's making things invisible, but it's still incredible CGI in there. But when we approach a different trick, each time it's figuring out, we do try to say, how do we make this as practical as possible? And then we'll fill in the gaps. And to me, throughout film cinema, that's where the best shots in some of my favorite movies have come from, when they build it from the ground up of, let's try to make it practical and then fill in with CG when possible, or this new technology that's emerging. They'll use that. So the quicksand example, we have this video where I sink down in the sand, and it was really, it's just based off the word quicksand. We did it in my backyard, and we're like, how would we actually have me sink down in this play box of sand? And so we actually went back to an old Princess Bride shot that we remembered. And I don't know if you guys have seen that movie. It's been many years, probably 20 years since you've seen it, but like the prince dives down into the sand and gets sucked in. And we know they did it practically. So we no one has a picture of how they did it. They don't have behind the scenes, but we figured out it looks like the sand kind of bounces. And so we realized there's like this rubber vinyl or something that the sand was on, but then how did they fill the hole from the sand? So they had more rubber down below. And so we just tested over and over. We decided, we did the test. We happened to have a hole in another set where we built a pool. So we covered that, and our art team just started figuring out how to keep sand on and get through, and it was just a ton of iterations. So we try to jump to a mock-up phase really soon. I think a lot of filmmakers, for years got stuck in the stage where it's like, you can storyboard something forever. You can think about it in your head and play soundtracks along with it as you're like dreaming about the shots and stuff. But at some point, you just got to get the camera out and not shoot the final thing, but just start shooting. And it's something we learned from following a lot of people at Pixar and animation movies. They do this thing, which is way different than like real life action movies, is they go and make the movie like 18 times over their animatics. And so for us, it was like, we did the animatic version and realized they're still in storyboarding so many different things in the framing that you can draw to look like that, but once you put a camera out, it doesn't look like that. So we always, like, Mondays currently we write, the whole team can be a part of that, and then that evening or Tuesday morning, we start literally with a camera in our hands, start mocking it up. So by the time you've seen one of our videos on social media, we've probably shot that video 2 to 4 times.
Wow.
In-house, and we could show you the version after version where we're changing the blocking or the prop changes, just because when you shoot it, you can just all talk about the same thing, and it's not theoreticals anymore. So we try to move through the mock-up phase, and so we do that in the art process as well. If it's like, hey, how do we get you to disappear practically or jump down a hole? we just make it a bunch of times until we can see what that looks like.
Does your team have a goal of frequency? Like, do you try to post once a week or twice a week? How do you go about that?
Yeah, it changes. We're obviously flexible if other projects are coming in during the pipeline, but generally we try to get 2 videos shot every single week. It doesn't mean they come out. The range of editing just takes different times. Sometimes it could be 3 weeks to edit, sometimes it could be 3 months. But the production is, I think the cadence, I haven't checked in a while, but we usually post something at least once a week, if not 2 times a week.
And in terms of like the logistics, we have a ton of aspiring filmmakers that listen to this podcast. You know, Zach King, when people, at least from a viewership standpoint, they see the videos you're putting out, but you cover a lot of ground. Like, you work with celebrities, you release things to YouTube, you work with brands, you do your own projects. How would you kind of encompass like your business, and if it was structured for like an up and coming creator who wants to make a self-sustaining lifestyle similar to what you do, what's kind of the entire structure to the business and how you kind of package it from a more strategic setup? Yeah,
right now, what are we? We're a mix of like a studio and a production company, and I say studio because we probably have our own built-in distribution. But, if you're starting, I think it's probably a bad example to look at me or any other creator that's at a certain level, because it's confusing. There's so many different businesses. You definitely don't start all of those at once. And if you look back at how I started, and most creators, like, it's them and a camera, and they shoot a ton of videos, hundreds of videos, until anyone ever sees it, or one turns into, what we call banger. And then that they try things along the lines of what maybe worked there and continue, and grow a team around it and grow different businesses around it. So it's really figuring out, I encourage people who are just starting and trying, even if it's just starting YouTube or just starting filmmaking, go make stuff, go make a ton of it. You can put it on a cadence if you want, but just go make. And then I think an important part is showing stuff. For me, when I look back at my high school, even though there wasn't YouTube, it was the every couple weeks on Friday night showing my family what I had made. That was the pressure for me. Like, I'm a huge last minute person. I love doing things the day they're due. And so, but that energy of pressure, if you could try to simulate that every day in your work, and then, you know it's coming up and you show something. Even for me in my home videos, I just took a trip to Italy, and my goal was to have like a short little documentary of what our trip was. And I knew when I came back, like in 3 days after I would land at LAX, all my wife's family was in town. And so I was like, I'm going to premiere that thing. And so that's my reason to get this 20-minute thing edited. And so I always have to have like the deadline for the pressure.
And for yourself, you've now obviously become a personality, and you have, 91 million followers across platforms, if not more. What has that been like for you? Do people recognize you? What's that experience? Do you feel like that kind of celebrity nature? You're also a very down-to-earth, like accessible person in terms of your energy and personality. So yeah, I'm kind of curious to what that's like for you, just living day-to-day life. Has it had any effect, or does it not affect it at all? Do you have to plan for that when you go into spaces or connect with people?
Yeah, the celebrity aspect of life is definitely weird. I would pay a ton of money to lose it in real life and not have any recognition. Over vacation, I grew a beard, and I wore my hat like way down and sunglasses, and it was awesome because it was like it lowered.
Should I shave it?
Yeah, I was already gonna shave it, but I.
But you wanted to give the illusion of option.
But luckily, the crowd was 10% higher on the shaving side.
Okay, there we go.
So that worked out.
Okay.
But yeah, celebrity has been weird. It really took off. It was okay in the Final Cut King days. It was awesome because just people with Final Cut King fans would come up, and that was not that often. But when Vine blew up, that was the first time. Every day I was going out to lunch at Albertsons. They had this like cheap 20-cent wing deal. And I was like really cheap. I still am kind of a cheap eater. And so I loved the deal. I'd go every day. And then literally it was like a week after I launched on Vine, or Vine took off for me. When I go there, I was always like 3 or 4 p.m. So the high school nearby would get out, and it was like and that was when I realized like, whoa, this is a different. And for me, I'm an introvert. I was a homeschooler. Like, I love to be alone. So like meeting people is now it's super cool. I've gotten used to it as part of life. But the new thing is figuring out with kids, because my kids don't really watch my videos yet. They're 4 and 5. They know I do filmmaking. They come around, and they've been around shoots, and they've been in some of the videos, but they don't know the celebrity aspect. So they currently are like, Daddy, is that your friend? Like every day, you know, when we're meeting people, they're like, you have a lot of friends. Like, this is weird. So like pretty soon, I think we're at the level, definitely with my oldest, that we're gonna have to like tell them what fame is, which is a weird concept, you know, but yeah.
Did it change the way that you interact with celebrities? Because you work with, you know, Tom Brady, Selena Gomez, you know, the list goes on. And when you interact with them, given your own background, does it change your perception of working with some of these people? Yeah.
Totally. It's weird. You realize all of a sudden that I mean, for me, it's awesome that people, it's cool meeting people who know the nuanced things. Like you guys did your research, and that's cool to talk about at that level. But when it's like, I'll never go up to a celebrity and get like, I love you in this movie, because they've heard it like 100,000 times. It's not sticky. And if anything, the coolest thing to do is like, hey, do you mind if I get a photo? And then take a photo and be super awesome and just kind of make it quick. But for me, it's like, you know, when we're on set with all the celebrities, it's like they just want to be treated like a normal human, because that's what they are. It's like weird to have this other level of stuff around it, and they get it, but just having normal conversation, you know. Yeah. How's your day going? Like, that's the thing they don't get asked.
And I know that LinkedIn isn't your main channel, but I've been loving your statuses recently. There was one thing you said, and it was, it's never been a better time to be a creator, but it's never been harder to get exposure.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like, to your thoughts for, one, people who are already creators, but also people starting out. Like, what would be your advice for that specifically?
Yeah, to get exposure, to get a following.
Yeah.
That's the mysterious question, right? I think there's different windows in time. Been doing this for social media for 12, 13 years. So we've seen some patterns that have happened over time, and it's really cool that there are these different opportunities that open up. And I think Gary Vee talks about this a lot, right? Like I don't follow him closely, but I'll see he'll like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, he was pushing TikTok, like get on TikTok now, that's free exposure. And he's totally right. Like if you're an early adopter in these things, a lot of times you can get burned by wasting time. But the advantage is if you're right, you gain incredible amounts. I think something people don't know, I don't talk about this much, but before, one of the reasons we're one of the bigger channels on TikTok is because we were there 5 years before it was called TikTok, and it was Musical.ly in 2015 or 16, I want to say. And there was still, and it was like me and one other team member, like it was still a weird platform for us to be on, because it was mostly females that were really young doing lip syncing. But it was around the time that Dub Smash was also taking off. And for me, I was posting a little bit on Dub Smash, but I was like, I think Musical.ly, like the energy of dancing was interesting. And the dance shows have always been huge, you know, on TV. So I felt like there was a niche that was being hit there. But we just started making, and I wasn't dancing out, but I was using the music feature along with my music tricks, or on the tricks, and I would make musical versions of the tricks that we've since taken down. But like it's kind of weird. Like I was reshooting stuff for the beats of the music. So I could still do the magic, and that got us like 25 million followers on Musical.ly. Wow. And then it was rebranded TikTok, so we already had like this huge head start advantage, and growing the audience from there. So I am always pushing to be the early adopter on the platforms. And again, like I just made a presentation where I listed all the apps that we've been on, and like I forgot about them. Like, do you guys remember Meerkat or Periscope or all?
Periscope. Yeah.
There was even one that I'm still kind of dabbling, but it's got rebranded. But it was called Byte, by one of the co-founders, by Dom, who created Vine. Okay. And so like I spent a good year and a half, 2 years on Byte, and obviously it didn't turn out to anything yet, but but like I always am trying to do the new thing. When Snapchat came out, it was like let's try that and see what that's like. Mm-hmm. And ultimately you have to find platforms that you can't force a square into the round peg. Like you have to make sure you love the platform. For me, I didn't love making all these Snapchats that were disappearing, because I put the same amount of like into the videos, like 2 weeks of post-production. We'd post it, and then I was like, in 24 hours, this is gone. Same with like Instagram stories in the beginning. It was like, luckily there's a feed where we could put our videos. But if it was just stories that would disappear, like I'm not going to spend my energy on that, and it's not going to pay off for us.
You know, there's early adopting the apps, but then there's also trends within the apps. And right. I'm curious to what your approach is for trends. Do you avoid them? Do you try to hop on the trends? Because they could last like very short periods of time, like
Yeah.
literally 6 hours or like a couple days.
Yeah,
you know?
and it's hard to measure it and perfect. For me, that was always hard because, again, I'm not able to whip out my phone like a lot of creators and just shoot a video with that trend the hour it comes out. I have to like plan, which could take a couple days, and then shoot, which could take a day or two, and then post-production, which could take 2 weeks. So we had kind of a version of like a trend team where we knew we could put it in this path, which was like green lighting it fast, shooting it fast, getting an editor dedicated on it full time, and then we just post it within hopefully 3 days of the trend. But again, like you're saying, a lot of the trends could be over. So we've just timed them to trends that were interesting for us. Like I remember a few of the ones that stick out is like the bucket list challenge with the water, the ice bucket ALS challenge. And then another one was this one called the bottle cap challenge, and then the bottle flip challenge. There was a couple bottle challenges, but we usually would hit them after they go. So we'd follow them on the internet, and when they break internet into mainstream, we try to be on the like first edge of that. And then obviously you get like 2 or 3 weeks on mainstream, and then it's pretty much dead. But for us, we don't do many trends now. It is helpful, and for younger creators, I would say if you can get something made for the trend, totally do it. I mean, that's definitely what I would do for TikTok now if I was just starting, is I'd kind of watch for these trends that have big enough waves and go on those, because you can get huge growth on that. But for us, we also want the content to be viewed in like 10 to 15 years from now, and you to understand it. Even when I watch some of our trend videos that we made 5-6 years ago, I'm like, what trend was that? Like, why did this is so random. What is this? And we try to spend less time on those now, because again, the library, we want it to be watchable and evergreen, and really we try to hit on human emotions. Like a lot of my videos, you'll see that the magic is used to like hack your life a little bit. It's got this attitude that's a little bit like, how do I cut the line magically, or how do I make something faster, or how do I skip traffic and get to home? And so those will be themes that are around in life, in the human experience for many years, and we try to tap into those.
Well, I know that we're coming close on time, and we do have one more segment to jump into, but I did want to ask you one question before that, which was, of all the work that you're doing now, what's the most meaningful to you? What is something that you really enjoy about your day-to-day process? I mean, there's so many opportunities. You have so many different businesses. You could really work with whoever you want to work with. But what's something that you're trying to strive to achieve in your day-to-day life while working through your continuous goals?
One of my favorite things now to do is spend time with the creative team, and specifically a lot of the producing team, to teach them. And when we onboard a new producer, it's just fun to see the learning curve when you can bring them into a business, say, like, it's up to your imagination. Like, you can do this as long as you start proving it and mocking it up and making it. And I love seeing the aha moment when creators, even who just kind of shadow for a little bit, they see that it just comes down to making it. Like, literally, you can get any idea made here if you show it to somebody and you have something to like, you mocked it up and you get them excited and you get this energy going, and then projects get made like that. So it's really cool to kind of see those light bulb moments in the team members and myself, where it's like, wait, I had no idea we could do this. It just came down to like just showing that we could prove the idea in some simple version of it. And then you look in Hollywood, that's how the ideas are made too. Like, somebody at lunch spitballs an idea, and then they start building it, and there's versions of it until it's not just overnight that these incredible movies are made.
All right, so it's time for our last segment called Rapid Fire.
Let's go.
We're going to ask you a few questions back to back. You have 15 seconds to answer them. Are you ready?
I'm going to have some coconut water before we get to rapid fire.
Get ready.
How many are there?
Just 4.
Okay.
Okay, ready?
Rapid fire meaning yes, no, or like
No.
one sentence?
Like one sentence.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. First question. What did you eat for breakfast before your interview with Ellen?
Oh, I thought you were going to say this interview. I had an acai bowl,
Wow.
a Hawaiian bowl.
Is that actually true?
You remember it?
For this.
Oh, before that, I was about to be, oh my God.
Before Ellen. So I don't eat breakfast unless I had done a workout, and I don't usually do workouts. So I would say I didn't eat. For sure I didn't eat.
Okay.
Fair.
Actually,
Okay.
I do remember what I had before I went on there. She had like pop chips in the green room, so I ate those.
Perfect. Next one. What's the most outrageous request you received from a brand or client?
Oh, it's for sure. I was asked to model for a male thong company, and it was actually really good pay too, which made it. I was dating Rachel at the time, and I floated it by her just to see, more as a joke, but like, I don't know, half serious, because the pay was really good, and I was like, should I do? Obviously it got shut down hard, but yeah, that's it. I don't remember what
it's so funny to hear you say that because you're such a family-oriented.
Oh
creator.
yeah, no, and I wasn't even big. I didn't even have a Vine at the time. I think I was like 3 weeks into Vine.
Wow.
So it was like my morals are family value, but it's not like the channel. It could have been anything at that point. But there's a lot of weird, but that was like the weirdest serious request.
Okay, so more weird things. What's the weirdest DM you've ever received?
Weirdest DM. I got a weird one in when I was traveling in somewhere in the Middle East. It was probably Dubai. And I don't usually read DMs, but I got this one, and when they knew we must have posted on stories that we were there with my team, and we took them up on the offer. It was like, can we take you out for an evening and take you to, it was to Salt Bay's restaurant. And so we go there, and then the night just went crazy from there. And we're not partiers at all, but like, it was just like river experience on a boat, like all these, it was just like a wealthy person that took us out, and it was just wild to see what access they have to do in the city of Dubai. But that was we usually don't answer like the DMs like that, like, but it sounds interesting enough, Wow. If it sounds like an adventure, we'll do it.
All right, last one. What is the motto that you live by?
Be kind to people. Yeah, treat people the way you want to be treated. That's the motto I'm teaching my kids right now.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Zach, one, for dedicating this episode to kids in the spotlight. Thank you to you for being on the podcast itself. Thank you to Ari, one of the leading...
Thank you, Ari, for sponsoring this video.
Thank you, Ari.
Yeah, thanks to Ari for owning the cinematic universe of lighting and cinema, or something like that.
You are such
Nailed
a pro.
it.
Something like that.
You are such a pro. Okay. Thank you to Ari, who is one of the leading innovators in cinema and lighting, for sponsoring this episode. Thank you so much. And thank you to our incredible audience for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this episode. To check out Zach King, really just Google Zach King and you'll see everything you need to know. We really appreciate it. I'm your host, Aryeh.
And I'm Christina. Stay tuned for our next episode, dropping every Tuesday. Till next time.
And go leave the podcast 5 stars, right?
Yes.
Go review it.
5 stars, follow,
subscribe.
Yep.
all of that. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you, guys.